Why, hello, my loves, and welcome back to Spook Manor. Are you here for a tragic tale of love in the Deep South? Then join me as we follow a hopeless romantic on a journey through the days of old. It is a cool fall evening in Huntsville, Alabama, where our story begins. A young teenage Will storms out of his parents' antique mansion home, which resides in the historic district known as Twickenham. He had another fight with his parents, who are prominent scientists at NASA's Space and Rocket Center. They wanted more out of him than his teenage heart desired, demanding he be more like his cousin, who seemed to be involved in every academic scholarship program available at the local high school. But he isn't motivated like his cousin. He cares little about his appearance, and certainly isn't outgoing. Rather, he much prefers to isolate himself in his room, far away from the responsibilities of the world. He is often bullied at school as a result of his poor choices. Friends are hard to come by when you're self-absorbed, and with the constant reminders of his failures from his parents, he often feels all alone in this world. At the age of 16, he walks alone through the dark streets. They had only just moved to Twickenham about a month ago, and he had yet to explore the surrounding area. The towering antebellum and Victorian homes that line the old road glow softly by the light of the elegant street lamps. They are a sight to behold, but Will remained uninterested as his mind was busy with the recent argument. He strolled along the sidewalks and up to Maple Hill Cemetery, stopping to eye the stone walls and wondering if they were built by slaves from a time long since past. He felt dead inside after the horrible fight, and the cemetery seemed a fitting place for him to retreat. He walked about the antique headstones of prominent people from Huntsville's rich past. In many ways, it was as though he were walking through an outdoor museum filled with marble, history, and sculptures that tell stories of the people laid to rest here. A few hours had passed, and Will was starting to get tired when he came upon a tall white mausoleum in the corner of the graveyard at Block 2, Row 9. A strange sense of peace had come over him. He sat on the grass beside the tall structure and fell into a deep sleep. His dream was very real and intense. He stood beside a young woman who appeared to be about 19 years in age. She is a delicate little beauty who gracefully walked about the street, occasionally gazing up at him with admiring and flirtatious eyes. The era is set in the 1830s, and her full gown reflects the prestige of her family. Will had become a strapping young gentleman of the time, reflecting exceptional wealth and class. People in Victorian attire would approach him and his darling fiancée, excitedly asking them questions about their wedding and introducing themselves with joyous smiles. It was then that Will slowly began to wake due to a strange sound coming from behind him. The night was still very dark, and he looked about curiously with sleepy eyes, his mind still groggy. The sound seemed to be coming from inside the mausoleum. He pressed his ear against it hard and listened intensely. It was a squeaking sound, like an old rocking chair creaking under the weight of a person. Will knocked carefully on the side of the white wall, which is engraved with records of the woman laid to rest there. "Is someone in there?" he called out. There was a long silence, but the creaking continued, and then a graceful, soft female voice called out from inside the tomb. "William, my beloved, is that you?" Will was shocked. How could this be? "Yes, it's Will," he called out, in hopes the mysterious voice would speak again. And to his surprise, she did. "William, my beloved, it is just like old times. I sit here in my favorite rocking chair, and we dream of our future to come," replied the ghostly voice. As Will began to converse with the mysterious woman, he again fell back into a deep and heavy sleep. This time, the dream was more intense than before. Will was admired by people, and he became proud of himself for the first time in his life. He and his soon-to-be wife had their future all planned out. They intended to have many children, and he would make his fortune in the cattle industry, and he did so later on in life by selling livestock. His current prestige came from the fact that he is the son of the governor, Thomas Bibb. His father is a well-respected man of the times. In 1819, he became a member of the Constitutional Convention and was also president of the Alabama Senate when his brother, Governor William Wyatt Bibb, died unexpectedly after falling from a horse in 1820. It was then that William's father, Thomas Bibb, took over the position as governor of the state. When young teenage Will awoke from this second strange dream the next morning, he was filled with a new sense of life. He loved having the eyes of lovely Southern belles and gentlemen look upon him with such respect and admiration. This newfound perspective began to reflect in his daily life. He suddenly cared more about his schooling and dressed in a way that presented of self-worth. He soon became interested in academics, with a particular passion for reading and history. He did this all so he could return to Maple Hill Cemetery and share his accomplishments with his new darling, the woman who waits patiently for him inside the mausoleum. Night after night he would go to her, and they would talk for hours until he would fall asleep and dream about the life that they had shared. But who is this amazing woman who now loves him more than life itself? She is the beautiful Mary Chambers, daughter of Dr. Henry Chambers, who served on staff as surgeon for Major General President Andrew Jackson during the Indian Wars. He worked as a member of the State Senate Constitutional Convention until 1819 and represented his district in the lower house of the legislature in 1820. Despite being elected a U.S. Senator, he unexpectedly passed away from illness while traveling to the capital. He was so loved by the residents of Alabama that Chambers County bears his name in honor of his service. Will could not wait to marry his blushing bride. The entire town and people from miles around were talking about what an extravagant affair the wedding would be. News of the engagement spread like wildfire across the state. The couple had become local celebrities, and everything had to be absolutely perfect in the eyes of the dream world. All they were waiting on was Mary's wedding dress to arrive. It has quite a journey, coming all the way from Paris. Only the best materials and finest beading would be acceptable for the glamorous Southern belle he would soon call his wife. When Will awoke beside his beloved's tomb that morning, he was filled with excitement and anticipation. He couldn't wait until nightfall, when he would return to the dream, his soulmate, and the wedding at hand. But something was different on this night. The sky is darker than usual, and the leaves had fallen heavily from a windstorm that day. Halloween was only a few days away, and the city had added a tasteful touch of festive decor to the cemetery grounds. Will laid his head upon the cold stone wall of the crypt and listened for the squeaking of the rocking chair inside. He was relieved when the sound came, though was suddenly filled with terror when Mary finally spoke. She had called out to him in a weak and desperate voice, stating that she had made a terrible mistake. All she ever wanted was to be beautiful, beautiful for him and for the entire town, to look her very best on their special day. And now, it was all over. Their dreams destroyed, purely because of her vanity and the acceptance of a horrible social norm common among the elites during this time in history, one that we all know as slavery. Will could not bear this. He begged and pleaded for answers, but her elegant voice simply faded away. He cried himself to sleep that night as he held the cold stone wall of her grave against his face. She had changed his life for the better. He had known love and self-respect for the first time in his existence. He believed in himself now, and his loved ones and peers were finally beginning to believe in him too. Will was not ready to let her go. As the sun peeked down through the colorful autumn leaves the next morning, a caretaker for the cemetery stood before him. The man was angry at first, but when Will inquired as to what happened to the woman in the tomb, the old man replied, "Well, you want to know about this grave? Come back on Sunday. There's an annual cemetery stroll that has become one of the largest living history walks in the nation. People get all dressed up in period costumes. There are activities and live music. It's a huge event, fun for the whole family. Bring your parents, kiddo. It will be good for you to be with the ones who love you." The old man added with a look of compassion for the distraught teen, and that is exactly what Will did. Sunday had arrived, and he stood before Mary Chambers' mausoleum. There is a massive crowd of people standing around in a circle, waiting for the lovely woman in a Victorian wedding gown to speak. It was then that Will got his answers as to what happened to his beloved dream bride. On the day of their wedding, a servant was to bring Mary some Epsom salts, a common practice at the time to ashen or pale the skin, which was a desired look during this period in history. Yet, in these times, it was also common practice among the elites and plantation owners to keep their slaves illiterate as a form of oppression, intended to prevent them from gaining an education so that they could never rise up and become free. A foolish, evil, and often naive practice it was to a carefree, wealthy debutante. And yet, in this case, karma had the last laugh. The slave had accidentally brought Miss Mary Chambers a form of arsenic, or some type of poison, by mistake as a result of the imposed illiteracy. The costume speaker went on to charismatically explain in the most entertaining manner that Mary's beloved husband, William Bibb, had rushed to her side, married her before her passing, and buried her in the exquisite wedding gown which she had loved so much. As a showing of his deep affection, grief and sorrow for his loss, this grand mausoleum, one of the first erected in Maple Hill Cemetery, was built in her honor as a final resting place. As the actress wrapped up her delightful show, Will fought back tears. So this is how his beloved had died. It was the devastating result of a slave kept unlettered and Mary's own self-imposed ignorance. He could overhear wandering patrons speak of the urban legend which wraps itself around this bit of history, that Mary Chambers was buried sitting upright in her favorite rocking chair, that if you knock on her grave at night, you can hear her chair squeaking or her voice calling out to her beloved William Bibb. And though young William was heartbroken at his loss, he decided that he would not fall from this experience. Rather, he would learn from her mistakes. He honored his dear Mary Chambers for the gift of self-love and respect that she had given him by becoming a teacher. Will was never the same after his ghostly romance, and lived a long, happy life in her memory, providing the gift of personal freedom and knowledge to every lucky child he encountered. So tell me, my loves, was Will's experience that of a past life vision, a ghostly possession, or did he in fact fall in love with the spirit of a Southern belle from long since past? Please comment down below and like and subscribe for more fictional stories that are often of actual urban legends and sometimes have historical reference. See you next week and have a good night.